Wouldn't it be amazing to listen to a podcast in English and understand every single word? Idioms, phrasal verbs, collocations, and all. No more getting lost, stuck, or confused because there was something said that everyone's laughing about and you're not really sure what it meant. Instead, you get to choose a podcast that's interesting to you, listen to it, and just enjoy it. This is a feeling members in my Confident Women community have regularly because of our focus on theme-based vocabulary growth, and we have our podcast club as well. I want you to have that same joy and excitement when listening to a podcast of your choice. For example, Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. In fact, that's exactly what we're going to do today. You and I are going to explore a specific episode of Oprah's Super Soul Sunday where she interviews Elizabeth Gilbert, author of the book Eat, Pray, Love. We're going to take an in-depth look at the language used in that podcast, the idioms, phrasal verbs, and so on, so that you can listen to that particular episode, understand every single word, and just enjoy the podcast. So after watching this lesson today, I recommend that you visit this specific episode. I'll make it easy for you by leaving a link below. When you do that, you'll get to hear all the vocabulary you learned today used in context, the most effective way to expand your vocabulary. What that means is not only will you understand the idioms, collocations, and more that you hear in that specific episode, but you'll also recognize them and understand them when you hear them in other podcasts, conversations, TV shows, and more. Plus, you can use that same vocabulary in your English conversations. Now, before we continue, if you don't already know, I'm Anne-Marie with Speak Confident English. Everything I do is designed to help you get the confidence you want for your life and work in English. I do that by sharing weekly Confident English lessons where I share my top fluency building strategies and advanced level vocabulary like we're going to do in this lesson today. So while you watch, make sure that you subscribe to my Speak Confident English channel on YouTube so that you never miss one of my Confident English lessons. And now, let's talk more about this specific podcast, this interview that Oprah did with Elizabeth Gilbert. You might be curious why we're exploring one specific episode. And a while ago, I did a lesson on why podcasts are an effective way to improve your listening skills as well as your overall vocabulary. I'll share a link to that specific lesson, but here are 3 key reasons listening to podcasts is so effective. Number 1, podcasts are a gold mine for discovering new vocabulary that is commonly used in conversations every single day. Secondly, podcasts allow you to learn vocabulary in context. What that means is you're hearing an idiom or a phrasal verb used in a sentence as it's typically used. And in doing that, it tends to give you a better mental picture, which makes it easier to remember and use it in your own examples. And lastly, podcasts are way more fun than conventional, stagnant forms of learning new vocabulary. If you're having fun while learning, it motivates you to keep going. So that's why we're using a podcast to learn 21 common English phrases in this lesson today. Now, I have no doubt you know exactly who Oprah is, and you know she has a talk show and podcast called Super Soul Sunday. We're going to look at a specific episode with Elizabeth Gilbert called The Curiosity-Driven Life. If you've ever heard the advice, follow your passion, and either felt confused by that, frustrated, or even disagreed with it, this is a podcast episode for you to listen to. Here, Elizabeth Gilbert shares her thoughts and her own transition from the advice of following your passion into following your curiosity instead. From start to finish, we hear her initial perspective on that advice, follow your passion. And then we hear the story of a fan who wrote her an extremely shocking letter and how it completely transformed her initial perspective into this idea of following your curiosity. Throughout the episode, she uses a plethora of English phrases that allow her to express her thoughts with impact and accuracy. So let's get to these 21 common phrases from this episode of Super Soul Sunday. I want you to understand exactly what they are so that you can go listen to the episode with absolute confidence and enjoy it. To help organize this lesson, I've divided the episode up into 4 different parts, each one focused on one of the key points that she shares. And along the way, I'll introduce you to the common phrases we're going to look at, their meaning, and examples. If you want to see those more in depth, I recommend that you visit this lesson at the Speak Confident English website, where I've written all of this out. And now let's start with section number 1. Passion is everything. In this first part of the episode, Elizabeth Gilbert shares her initial perspective on that common advice, follow your passion. And in doing so, here are several useful common English phrases that she uses. Number 1, to speak out against somebody or something. For example, Jessie decided that she was going to speak out against the new policies at work. To speak out against something or someone means to publicly share your opinion. And of course, it's typically an opposing opinion. A second important phrase in part 1 is to piece something together. Imagine putting all the pieces of a puzzle together. As you put more of those pieces together, you start to get a clearer picture. And when we use this phrase idiomatically, it means to begin getting a clearer picture of the truth or what's real based on pieces of information. For example, fans listened to the album and tried to piece together the underlying message from the artist. The third common phrase from part 1 is out of the ether. For example, money doesn't appear out of the ether. To appear out of the ether means to appear from nowhere. We have a similar idiom in English, to appear out of thin air. Number 4 on this list is to stay in the game. For example, you must put your blood, sweat, and tears into growing your business if you want to stay in the game. To stay in the game means to continue being involved or continue giving your effort in order to achieve success despite experiencing obstacles or barriers. Is there anything that you've worked particularly hard to achieve? And no matter what happened, no matter what challenge was in front of you, you stayed involved, you gave it your effort, you stayed in the game. If you've had that experience, let me know. Try using that expression in your own example sentence, and you can share it with me in the comments below. And now let's look at one more common phrase from part 1 of this episode. To give a dog and pony show. To give a dog and pony show is a rather unusual idiom, and it means to arrange an event that is simply there to impress someone or to encourage someone to invest their money. And you might use it in an example such as, when I'm looking for advice, I don't want a dog and pony show. In other words, what you want is something real. You want concrete advice that you can use, not something to simply impress you. And with that, let's move on to part 2 of this particular podcast episode. At this point in the episode, we hear about a shocking letter she received from a fan and the aha moment that came to her. The reality that passion isn't everything. Let's take a look at 3 common phrases you'll hear at this part of the episode. First, to keep up with someone or something. What this means is to do whatever is necessary to stay at the same or equal level as someone else or something else. For example, when my husband and I go running, I have to work extremely hard to keep up with him. If I want to stay at the same level, I have to do a lot of work. The next one to take a step back from something or someone. For example, I needed to take a step back from the situation in order to think deeply about possible solutions. To step back from something or someone means to separate yourself or withdraw from a situation so that you're able to have a broader or more objective perspective. And number 3 for section number 2 is to tear something or someone apart. For example, critics tore her first book apart, but she kept trying. To tear something or someone apart means to strongly criticize. Can you think of a movie or a TV show that you loved, but others tore it apart? They had strong criticisms to share. If so, try using this particular phrasal verb in that example and share it with me below. And now, section number 3 of this particular episode, bouncing through life. In this particular part of the podcast, we hear Elizabeth Gilbert's experience of reevaluating that common advice to follow your passion and where that reevaluation took her. And here are 5 common phrases you're going to hear. Number 1, to have a checkered past or journey. We tend to use this to describe someone's past life that may have been full of bad decisions or not really appropriate behavior. It certainly isn't the way they behave or make decisions now. For example, the current political candidate has a rather checkered past. Number 2, to faceplant or a faceplant. Now, if we use this phrase literally, it means to fall with your face hitting the ground first. Super painful. But you'll often hear this used idiomatically. Imagine what it feels like to hit the ground face first. Not only is it painful, but if other people see it, it's kind of embarrassing. So if you have a situation in which you felt embarrassed or maybe even felt a little bit of internal pain, you might describe it as a faceplant. For example, I've faceplanted more times than I can count while working to achieve my goals. What I mean by that is I've made a lot of maybe embarrassing or even painful mistakes along the way. Our 3rd phrase for this section is to be golden. This is often used as a way to compliment someone. For example, thank you so much for all your help. You're absolutely golden. Or you're absolute gold. This can be used to mean that you are of great or significant value. It can be used to mean that you're not at all wrong or that you're absolutely fine. For example, let's say you make a little mistake and you tell your coworker, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do anything wrong." And they might respond with, "Oh, don't worry about it. You're golden." In other words, you're fine. There's no reason to apologize. Number 4, to bounce through or around. For example, to bounce through life. What this means is to move in an energetic and enthusiastic manner, going from one thing to the next. Here's another example sentence. Ellen is bouncing through life and enjoying every minute of her retirement. And now our last common phrase from this particular section. To be at ease with someone or something. This means to be perfectly calm and comfortable. For example, I feel at ease with my current stage in life. Have you ever had a moment in English where you felt perfectly at ease? Maybe you were talking with someone who made you feel really comfortable and you just enjoyed the conversation. Or after watching this particular Confident English lesson, you will feel perfectly at ease listening to this podcast episode that we're talking about today. And now, section number 4 of this particular Super Soul Sunday podcast episode. Take passion off the table. This is the most critical section of this particular episode. We're going to explore 8 common phrases that you're going to hear. And in this particular section, you'll hear Elizabeth Gilbert urge everyone to follow their curiosity as opposed to their passion. And she walks through exactly what that means. The first phrase you'll hear in this section is to take something off the table. This is a phrase everyone in my Confident Women community should definitely know because we've talked about it recently. It's a great phrase to know because it's very common. To take something off the table means to remove it from the discussion, or it's something that you're not allowed to discuss. For example, let's not take curiosity and interests off the table. What I mean by that sentence is let's make sure that curiosity and our interests are part of the conversation. Maybe we're working to resolve something, and we need to make sure that talking about curiosity and our interests is something that we talk about to reach that ultimate conclusion or solution. Our second phrase is to take everything out of somebody or something. For example, it took everything out of me to write my exams and pass. Or preparing for that presentation took everything out of me. What that means is to drain or take all the time and energy you had for something. And in the end, you're exhausted. Have you ever had something take everything out of you? If so, once again, I want you to try using that in your own example sentence. And the best place for you to share is right below in the comments. Number 3 in this section is to look back at something or someone. For example, when I look back at it, I can't help but laugh at the situation. To look back at something or someone is to think back to the past or reflect on something that happened. Number 4, to do a scavenger hunt of your life. Now, this one isn't really a common phrase in English, but I wanted to talk about it because it's rather unusual and it's an important one to understand. A scavenger hunt is a game that kids and even adults might play. It's when you have clues and you're supposed to understand the clue and collect items. For example, you might do a scavenger hunt around the city. Maybe you have a list of things that you're supposed to collect at different places in the city. And the team that collects all of those items or the most items on the list wins. This is a common game kids in the United States will play if their families celebrate Easter. It's common on the Easter holiday for someone to hide eggs around the house or the yard. And when kids wake up in the morning, they might do a scavenger hunt. They're supposed to go around and find those eggs and collect them. Now here it's being used, of course, idiomatically. To do a scavenger hunt with your life implies that you spend your life looking for clues or hints as to your life's purpose, its meaning. And over time, you collect those bits of information. Number 5 in this section is to not be into something. In the past, I've taught that to be into something means that you like it, you enjoy it. So here we're hearing the opposite in this particular episode. For example, I really love cooking, but I'm not really into baking. It's not something I like or enjoy. Phrase number 6 is to follow a trail of breadcrumbs. What this means is to follow a series of clues. For example, sometimes we need to follow a trail of breadcrumbs to truly discover our purpose in life. In other words, it doesn't always come at us in an immediate revelation or in an immediate decision. It's something that we discover over time. Okay, we have just 2 more common phrases we're going to review together so that you can fully understand and enjoy this particular podcast episode. Number 7 in this section is to let go of something or someone. For example, to truly relax, let go of your anxieties and the pressures surrounding you. To let go of something means to stop holding on to it, to stop focusing on it, or spending all your mental energy thinking about it. In other words, to release something or someone. And our last phrase for today, to be pushed around. What this means is to be forced into doing something or even bullied into doing something. For example, I will never forget my grandmother's advice. Don't let others push you around. With that, you have 21 common English phrases from this specific episode of Super Soul Sunday. To finish, I have a question and a recommendation for you. First, my question. What are your favorite 2 or 3 new phrases from this lesson today? I want you to limit your decision to just 2 or 3, and then I want you to try using those in your own example sentence. My recommendation is to then go listen to this episode. Listen to how those particular phrases are heard. It'll give you additional context or an additional visual picture of how to accurately use those phrases so that you always understand them when you hear them and you can use them successfully in your English conversations. If you enjoyed this Confident English lesson, I would love to know. You can tell me in one very simple way. Give this lesson a thumbs up here on YouTube, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.